Hi, Ghosties. I'm Macy.
And I'm Natalie.
And about 1.5 miles off the coast of the San Francisco Bay sits a notorious island that once housed some of the most dangerous criminals in the United States. Alcatraz operated as a federal prison for decades, and before then, it was home to war criminals and traitors. There are even rumors that it could have been a place that the native population used to exile those who broke the laws of their tribe. Even since that time, there's been an air of mysterious evil on this island. Even the biggest of skeptics feel the heavy and repressive nature of the island as they step foot off of the ferry and on to Alcatraz. And sometimes, if you're there long enough, you too may see the ghostly figures lingering in their prison cells, or even hear the sinister laughter of the murderers that once walked these halls.
Would you go?
Yes.
You would?
Yes.
After doing all this research, you would go?
I would go.
Because as of right now, I'm like, nah.
It's scary, like I'm on the border of maybe, maybe not, but yes.
I don't know if I would go. Prisons in general, we've talked about prisons, just
heavy in general.
It just feels really dark, and I don't want to invade that space.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Understandable if you don't.
But you could change my mind.
But this topic was suggested by Angelica, so thank you so much. Our tea today is Harney and Sons Earl Grey Supreme.
I'm very excited.
Me too. It's Earl Grey. Love Earl Grey. Supreme can only be better.
It smells very Earl Grey in here. Also, the heat just clicked on, so...
If we're sweating when we come back, you know why.
All right, let's go. It is Supreme Earl Grey.
It's like a more intense Earl Grey.
It is very intense. I don't know if it's because there was a lot of tea, not a lot of water, but it is very it's not Earl Grey, it's Earl Grey.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't like the way I said that.
I did. I like your many voices.
All right, well.
A place of many names, The Rock, Uncle Sam's Devil's Island, or just Devil's Island, Alcatraz is a looming presence in the bay, truly a sight to behold. It was considered escape-proof due to the strong currents, frigid waters, and long distance from land, so it's no wonder that it's been used to imprison some of the most notorious criminals of the mid-1900s. Though it is no longer operating as a prison, it's still in use today, run by the National Park Service and seeing over 1 million visitors per year. I read some statistics saying it was like over 1.5 million people per year.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't expect that. I mean, I guess, never mind. I was going to say people are into that, but they are.
Yes, they are. Many of the original structures are mere ruins today, but the presence of those who once called this island home is almost palpable to those who step foot on its rocky shore and tore through what is left of the buildings. Its time as a military fort turned military prison turned federal prison turned location for a years-long civil rights protest are only bits of this island's history. Its history and those who called it home have inspired many books and movies depicting life, the lives of those living there, and the attempts at escape from what some considered the most horrific conditions. Per usual, we'll start with the history.
Did anyone ever escape? Is that a thing, or am I making
debatable.
that up?
It's debatable.
Are we
not
gonna talk
officially.
about it?
We will.
Okay, because
there's never been an official escape from Alcatraz.
Okay, but I thought there was.
We'll talk about it. The 22-acre island is said by some to have been first used by the Ohlone, I think I'm saying that right, tribe who inhabited present-day San Francisco and much of the surrounding area for more than 10,000 years before Europeans arrived in California. So, per usual.
Yeah, I was about to say that's nothing new.
It was an important hub for transport, a place for gathering food and fishing, and some believe it was used as a ceremonial site to isolate members of their community who violated tribal laws, possibly a prison of sorts long before it was officially a prison.
That's really, really interesting.
It makes sense if it was. So I don't know where officially it was stated that. I just saw a lot of sources saying maybe it was this. Some think it was this. So it makes sense though, because it's like this just like jagged rock in the middle of the bay.
I mean, I guess it does make sense, but it's just kind of interesting that it was originally used for that, and as time went on, it just continued. Yeah. For that long.
I agree.
Really kind of, I don't want to say cool, but cool.
Yes. So there are some who claim that it was used by some tribes as this isolation, and some other tribes that believe that evil spirits inhabited the island.
So either way, whichever angle you take, it's dark.
Then in 1775, Spanish explorer Juan Manuel de Ayala set sail into the San Francisco Bay for the first time, giving his own name to the islands and land that he came across. The name Alcatraz comes from Ayala, who mapped out the bay and named it Isla de los Alcatrazes, or something like Island of the Gannets, or it was like some kind of waterbird pelican.
A side note, and this is off topic, all of the people and explorers and, when they came and they take pieces of land and they name it after themselves, why aren't we more creative? I'm thinking
he didn't name it after himself. He saw... When they were surveying and mapping, they would just be like, okay, well, this is the island of the birds because there's tons of birds here, so I'll just map that out real quick. I mean, it's not like they were having brainstorming sessions in
I know.
the ship, like, let's think of some snappy names.
Something cute. No, but I know. But I'm thinking, like, anytime I've started a new Animal Crossing game, it's like, we're naming our island something cute, something cool, something fun.
My island was named Ghastly.
My island on the last DS game of Animal Crossing was Weast.
But regardless, the name stuck and it was eventually anglicized and turned to just Alcatraz. Then in 1850, after California officially became a state, a presidential order set aside the island for military use. A fortress was built on the island because of the California gold rush and the growth of the area as protection for the bay and surrounding land from outside forces. Over 100 cannons were placed on the island, though none were ever fired in battle, and Alcatraz became the most heavily fortified military installation on the West Coast. A lighthouse was added in 1854, making it the first operational lighthouse on the coast as well. Military prisoners were brought almost immediately in the late 1850s, and it was officially designated as a place to house military prisoners in 1861 during the Civil War. It was a place Confederate sympathizers were imprisoned, and it stored many weapons to make sure they didn't get into the hands of those willing to help the South. Eventually, it was used for prisoners from the Philippine-American War in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and was where several members of the Hopi tribe in Arizona were sent when they refused to go along with the government mandate to assimilate to the new American way of life, and with land decrees and educational programs and all that.
Every time we talk about history, it always just makes me like
a little sad, a little upset,
disappointed, and just like, is this who we are?
The original fort was torn down in 1909, leaving only its basement level, and from then until 1911, military prisoners built the new prison on Alcatraz Island. It was then designated the Pacific Branch U.S. Disciplinary Barracks for the U.S. Army.
That was a mouthful.
It was. It served in this capacity until 1933, when the U.S. Department of Justice acquired it from the Army and made plans to put the rock to use as a prison for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And so, by August of 1934, the building was modernized to the tune of $250,000 or $5.8 million today dollars. Though it still had pieces of the old citadel and military barracks, security increased and inmates were brought in. Crime was up in the late 20s and early 30s, be it bank robberies, gang activity, and just outright murder, and the federal government needed a place of high security to keep those most at risk of prison breaks and reoffending in prison and locked up in a place they deemed escape-proof. And Alcatraz became America's most secure prison. So in the 20s and 30s, there was just a lot of crime. It was the Depression, Prohibition,
so much.
Lots and lots of, that's just where you get like Bonnie and Clyde and John Dillinger and all of these people who were robbing banks all over the states. And like, you don't hear about prison breaks a lot. Like you don't today, like maybe there's a few that are like, they escaped, but we immediately captured them.
Yes.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
At this time, it was like, well, they escaped again. Like, I don't know what was going on with the prisons then, but there were a lot of escapes.
I wonder how back then they did it. Because in movies and things, or mostly TV shows and cartoons, it's like they have a spoon and they like dig a huge hole for months and months and months. I know it's not really like that. So I'm interested
Sometimes
to know.
it is.
Is really?
Yeah. Not just a spoon, but yes.
Okay. I don't know. I'm very interested because obviously there's the easy ones where it's like, oh, I charmed this guard and they helped me, you know.
Yes. And I don't know a lot, and maybe it was a lot of bribing people to let them escape, you know.
Yeah. So they were just let out, and that's counted as escaping.
I don't know anything about prison history. I know about this prison's history, and that's it. So, but I'm not sure.
Prison interests me.
We will hear a story of escape later.
Okay. Prisons interest me, but they also make me feel sad, but also I don't know how I feel.
I have a like a morbid fascination with things like this.
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah.
Not necessarily that I like it.
No.
I'm intrigued by it.
There you go. Yeah, agreed.
The first prisoners were escorted by train and high security coaches guarded by the FBI and the U.S. Marshals to the island starting in August of 1934 from other prisons like Leavenworth, McNeil Island, Eastern State Pen, Atlanta, Washington Asylum and Jail, and the D.C. Reformatory. This was used like a last resort prison, housing the worst in the nation. By its first year of operation, the prison housed 242 prisoners, many well-known criminals of the time, and one of the first to arrive was Verrill Rapp, who was transferred from McNeil, serving a 4-year sentence for assaulting a police officer and breaking jail. He was quoted as saying, Alcatraz was a place of inhumane treatment that caused inmates to go insane. But that's not the view that the establishment had for itself. On its first anniversary, the Bureau of Prisons wrote, quote, the establishment of this institution not only provided a secure place for the detention of the more difficult type of criminal, but has had a good effect upon discipline in our other penitentiaries also. No serious disturbance of any kind has been reported during the year. The mere existence of Alcatraz kept prisoners across the country in line in hopes that they too wouldn't be sent to Devil's Island. So Alcatraz was built, they heard about all these horrible conditions and You're living on an island that's inescapable and just terrifying. And so they were like, okay, I don't want to get sent there. I'll just behave and serve my time and not risk it.
Bad for the ones that are there, but like...
good for the rest of the country,
I guess.
Question mark. Yeah, it was a good deterrent for crime, especially within prisons, because people weren't being sentenced to Alcatraz.
Yeah.
It was like the judge has had enough with you while you've stayed in prison and is going to send you to Alcatraz, or the warden or whoever was in the decision-making process.
Yeah, that's really scary.
The prisoners here were placed in cells that typically measured 9 by 5 by 7 feet and held only a hard bed, desk, wash basin, a toilet, and no privacy. There were opportunities for the inmates to work on the grounds, but they spent most of their time in their cells. Aside from the 4 cell blocks, D being for the worst offenders, the prison itself contained the warden's office, a visitation room, a library, and a barber shop.
They let people visit Alcatraz? I figure if you're in maximum security, you're an escape artist, we don't want you
Well, visitation was a privilege here. So if you were bad, no. They weren't going to let you have visitors. But if you were just an orderly inmate, they would let people visit. I don't know. It's like once a month or something. I don't remember what the schedule is, but yeah.
I wouldn't expect that with something like that, but okay.
There's a few other things here that are unexpected that I was like, no way, but we'll get to it. So if you're interested in things like this, like I am, like the library, I was intrigued. I don't know why I'm intrigued by library systems in places like prisons. Okay. I don't know, but if you're interested, here you go. Inmates could place orders from the book catalog to the library and receive their books to their cell by the librarian later in the day. The library had a collection of some 10 to 15,000 books, mostly left over from the army days, and anything relating to sex, crime, or violence of any kind was taken from the pages or library as a whole. They were allowed a max of 3 books and 12 textbooks a day, a Bible, and a dictionary. They were allowed magazines, but no newspapers, and a chaplain regulated what was allowed in the library to keep it wholesome. Inmates in Alcatraz read anywhere from 75 to 100 books per year.
Pretty cool, actually.
I think about it all the time. Every time I hear anything about prison, I was like, I would just sit in my cell all day and read.
If I went to prison, I would just get jacked. I would get super buff.
Yeah. Okay, so book tangent over. Something else I found super interesting that I hadn't known before was that the guards and their families lived on the island year-round. By June of 1936, there were 52 families living on the island, including 126 women and children. The families would live in apartments or cottages on the island and had access to large buildings that contain amenities like a market, a bowling alley, a soda fountain, and a place for games and movie nights. The children would be boated to school every morning, and there were 12 scheduled runs to a nearby pier for those living on the island to make it to the mainland if needed. So 12 every day.
Okay, now I could see someone escaping. If there's that many boats going back and forth every day.
No one ever escaped this way.
Really?
Yeah. People tried.
I'm interested to know.
Prisoners and staff were provided 3 meals a day, and when the prison first opened, a rule of complete silence was implemented except for whispered tones at mealtimes and recreation. And anyone who broke this rule was subject to punishment. The prisoners were entitled to only 4 things. They said, you are entitled to 4 things: food, clothing, shelter, and medical attention. Everything else was considered a privilege to be earned, and any of these privileges could be taken away from you for punishment. Security within the prison was extremely tight, and the guards were diligent. The bars, doors, locks, and electrical fixtures and other physical security were checked constantly. The prisoners were counted 13 times a day to make sure they were all accounted for, and the ratio of prisoners to guards was the lowest in America at the time, being 3 prisoners to every 1 guard. Inmates living in Alcatraz were permitted only 1 visit per month, but if you were known to cause trouble, you weren't allowed any outside visitors. During its operation from 1934 to 1963, Alcatraz housed over 1,500 inmates. Some very well known if you know anything about crime in America, including Arthur Doc Barker, who died while attempting to escape from Alcatraz actually, and one of the only people given the title Public Enemy No. 1, Alvin Creepy Karpis, who were both of them were members of the Barker Karpis gang. They were notorious criminals. Al Capone spent several years in Alcatraz. Ellsworth Bumpy Raymond Johnson, also known as the Godfather of Harlem, spent 9 years in Alcatraz, and so did George Machine Gun Kelly Barnes. Oh, and James Whitey Bulger, though all at different times, of course. One of the most famous and quite possibly the most dangerous felon at Alcatraz was Robert Birdman Stroud, or the Birdman of Alcatraz. He spent 17 years in Alcatraz, most of his time in solitary confinement. In fact, he entered the prison system at 19 for manslaughter and spent the rest of his life there for the murder of a prison guard. Of the 54 years he spent in prison, 42 of those were in solitary confinement because of his violent nature. He was a self-taught ornithologist who wrote several books on the subject, which is very interesting. That's why he was called the Birdman. He was a genius and a diagnosed psychopath. though he had a great interest in birds that he studied from his prison cell and even discovered a cure for a common avian hemorrhaging disease. During his time in Alcatraz, much of his time was spent in D block when he wasn't in the medical ward. So he had a lot of medical issues. But I think he was at Leavenworth before Alcatraz, and they allowed him to keep a bird in a cage and stuff in his room so he could study and learn about. And he was like actually a kind of respected man in the ornithology field.
I mean, sounds like it.
I would read a book about him.
That's really interesting.
But he was a very violent guy. If you were considered to have behavioral issues, such as not following orders or fighting, you were sent here to serve your punishment. So D block, and that's where their solitary confinement was.
Yeah.
It was considered the treatment block for the worst of the bunch. And it was here where the most severe punishments were carried out, including isolation, solitary confinement, strip searches, complete silence, no talking. And they were given their meals in their cells, were not permitted to work, and could only shower 2 times a week. You could spend anywhere from 3 to 19 days in total confinement in the D block. The worst of the punishments were conducted in 6 cells at the end of D block, called the Hole. It was here where inmates were limited to only 1 10-minute shower a week, 1 hour of exercise in the yard a week, and complete isolation. You would only have a toilet and a wash basin in your cell if you were in the Hole. But if you were moved to the strip cell, you had it the worst. It was here where the most out-of-line prisoners were put, and the cell had nothing but a hole in the floor for a toilet. After an attempted escape and eventually a murder of a fellow inmate, Henry Young spent nearly 22 months in solitary confinement by the end of it. Some of that time in the strip cell, and he testified about his experience during his 1941 trial. Quote, "Its size was approximately that of a regular cell, 9 feet by 5 feet by 7. You are stripped nude and pushed into the cell. Guards take your clothes and go over them minutely for whatever few grains of tobacco may have fallen into the cuffs or pockets. There is no soap, no tobacco, no toothbrush. The smell, well, you can describe it only by the word stink. It is like stepping into a sewer. It's nauseating. After they have searched your clothing, they throw it at you. For bedding, you get 2 blankets, around 5 in the evening. You have no shoes, no bed, no mattress, nothing but the 4 damp walls and 2 blankets. Once a day, I got 3 slices of bread. No, that is an error. Some days I got 4 slices. I got 1 meal in 5 days and nothing but bread in between. In the entire 13 days I was there, I got 2 meals. I have seen but 1 man get a bath in solitary confinement. In all the time that I have been there, the man had a bucket of cold water thrown over him."
This isn't even punishment for anything. This is just torture.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
I'm scared to start talking about the hauntings of this place.
Well, Henry Young, so he basically sent to solitary confinement for an escape attempt. And then after he got out, he went crazy and murdered another inmate that he had been working with. And so his lawyer claimed that he shouldn't be held responsible for his crimes because he had been subjected to cruel and unusual punishment by the guards in Alcatraz. And several prisoners committed suicide while in Alcatraz, and some even claimed to have gone a little insane after their time there.
I hate to say I'm kind of on his lawyer's side with that.
I don't remember how it ended up, if he was sentenced or not, but
how can you subject someone to that and expect them to come out and be like, great,
perfectly
thank you,
fine.
I'm cured.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Especially when he already had some mental health issues going in.
Yes.
It was described in the local paper as, quote, "the great garbage can of San Francisco Bay, into which every federal prison dumped its most rotten apples." And in 1939, U.S. Attorney General Frank Murphy attacked the penitentiary, saying, quote, "the whole institution is conducive to psychology that builds up a sinister ambitious attitude among prisoners." By the 50s, conditions on the island had improved and the prisoners were offered more privileges, but that didn't undo the harms that were committed at the hands of the prison officials to the criminals that were housed there. Escape was the first thought on every inmate's mind as soon as they arrived on the island. While it was in operation for 29 years, not a single person had ever successfully, officially escaped the prison. 36 prisoners made a total of 14 attempts at escaping. Of those, 23 were caught, 6 were shot and killed during their attempt, 2 drowned, and 5 are listed as missing and presumed drowned. There were 2 very notable attempts that I'll mention here, though. So there were several where I read one where he was doing laundry. He was in charge of laundry.
Yeah.
And he would slowly, steal 1 jacket, 1 pants at a time, slowly, for a military uniform, and eventually put his military uniform on, snuck out, and got onto a boat, and didn't realize they weren't going to the mainland. They were going to another island. And by the time they got out into the water, the people realized he was missing. So by the time they got to the other island, they were like, hey, the gig's up. Let's go back.
Oh, that's kind of a good plan, though.
Yeah, but there were a lot of little sneaky plans.
Yeah.
On May 2nd, 1946, 6 prisoners attempted to break free, leading to the most violent escape attempt, called by some the Battle of Alcatraz. Bernard Coy, Joseph Kretzer, Sam Shockley, Clarence Carnes, Marvin Hubbard, and Mirren Thompson overpowered guards and took control of the cell house, entered the weapons room, and demanded the keys for the for the doors outside. 2 guards, William Miller and Harold Stites, were killed, and half of the men returned to their cells after they were initially unsuccessful at exiting the outer door to escape by boat as they had planned. So they had planned to steal the keys for outside of the recreation area and take a boat and leave the island, but the guy who had the keys gave them the two doors to get to the recreation, but not the exit out of the recreation. He kept that one to himself, and they were unable to do that. A couple of guards got killed in the process, and so half of them were like, this isn't worth it. I'm just going back to my cell.
What about the others?
Coy, Kretzer, and Hubbard held guards hostage for 2 days.
Oh my God.
On May 4th, the Marines intervened and killed the 3 who remained to fight. 17 other guards and 1 other prisoner was injured in the altercation. The 3 remaining who started the Battle of Alcatraz were sentenced to death or given a life sentence for their part in the murder of the 2 guards. One attempt at escape still leaves questions to this day as to whether or not 3 inmates had actually successfully escaped from this escape violence. So this is the one that's the official narrative, is that they do not believe the men had been successful, but their bodies have never been found.
So they could be out there.
Maybe. The full story is very interesting, so I suggest you look into it if you're also interested, but the gist of it is that on June 11th, 1962, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin executed their carefully planned escape out into the water in hopes to make it to shore and off to live lives of freedom. Using an improvised drill made from a stolen vacuum motor and a metal spoon, the 3 men carved out a hole in the back of their cells of B block. They used air vents in an unguarded utility corridor behind B block to make their way to the roof, and it took them months to make the holes, which they covered with a false wall, and played accordions during music hours so the guards couldn't hear them working away. They had stolen all these little pieces, made their own little drill with a spoon, and slowly carved holes into their cell during music hour while people played accordions really loud so no one could hear them working.
This is kind of a very thought out plan.
Very, very thought out. They fastened together 50 stolen raincoats and rubber to construct a makeshift raft, and placed papier-mâché dummies with human hair on their beds to make the guards think they were still in their beds sleeping at night, giving them ample time to escape before anyone noticed. They would place these dummies even while they worked at night. They would crawl out and climb up in the air ducts and above to work on the raft and work on their plans. Yeah. And left these dummies that they had hair from the barber shop in the prison on these dummies, so the guards would walk by and shine the light and just see the hair and a face, kind of half covered.
Okay, see, I know about this already, the little dummies and everything.
Another inmate, Alan West, was supposed to go with them, but wasn't able to complete the hole in his wall in time and didn't make it out with the others. But West is the reason we know as much about their plan as we do today. Only a couple life vests and a few personal belongings have been found of the men, and they are officially presumed dead from drowning after years of investigation by the FBI. The FBI's investigation was closed in December of 1979. The FBI closed their investigation and said there's no evidence of anything of them escaping, so they had to have drowned. But there are some who believe that the raft was actually found on a nearby island called Angel Island, as well as a supposed report of carjacking by 3 men in the vicinity. Supposedly. It is believed by some that there was a cover-up of the men's successful escape to keep the reputation of prison as inescapable and ironclad.
I could see that.
Supposedly, the men escaped to Brazil, where they lived out the rest of their days. A photograph of 2 men from 1975 in Brazil resembled the Anglin brothers. A facial recognition analyst concluded that it was them.
Really?
But this is all, not official. I don't know if facial recognition analysis is
like a reputable thing. Yeah. But okay, I'm on board. I think they did.
It's interesting.
It is very interesting.
Alcatraz may have had a reputation for its harsh conditions, but it was actually spending the most money per prisoner than any other prison in the U.S. at the time, spending $10 a day per person as opposed to the average $3 that most facilities were spending. The building was also difficult to maintain due to the structural damage brought on by its exposure to constant salt spray from the water around it. And in 1958, some $5 million were needed to fix the structures on the island, and repairs had begun. But by 1961, the prison was considered a lost cause by engineers, and the Attorney General at the time, Robert F. Kennedy, decided that they would take the money and build a new maximum security prison in Illinois instead. So rather than having to spend all this money to continue to keep it running, they would just take all that money, build a prison that was easily maintained, and let this one go. The prison officially closed on March 21st, 1963, and the final report on Alcatraz by the Bureau of Prisons stated, quote, "The institution served an important purpose in taking the strain off the older and greatly overcrowded institutions in Atlanta, Leavenworth, and McNeil Island, since it enabled us to move to the smaller, closely guarded institution for the escape artists, the big-time racketeers, the inveterate connivers, and those who needed protection from other groups. The island played its role at a time when it was needed, and from then it was essentially abandoned. Some thought a monument to the United Nations, as well as a shopping center and hotel, would be a great addition to the island now that it was no longer in use, kind of like a Statue of Liberty for the West Coast. Though, as you can tell today, that was never erected. Instead, in November of 1969, a small group of Native Americans that called themselves the United Indians of All Tribes banded together and, in an act of civil disobedience, took control of the island in protest, claiming the island as, quote, Indian land, and requesting that a Native American cultural center and education complex be constructed on the island. They wanted to emphasize the troubles faced by the Native American population due to federal policies and draw attention to their plight. They received a massive amount of support from the public, with thousands of people traveling to the island over the next 18 months that they held control over Alcatraz Island. Unfortunately, the situation devolved into chaos that couldn't be controlled by the first group of people who traveled there for the good of their people. Damage had been done to the buildings, including graffiti, vandalism, and a fire that destroyed several of the buildings on the island. And in June of 1971, federal marshals removed the remaining protesters from the island, and it sat abandoned once again. So there was a small group of, it was mostly college students from nearby in San Francisco who went there for their cause. Yeah. And they claimed the land. They were like using some statute, I don't remember exactly which one it was, but saying that abandoned land was native land.
Yeah.
Eventually, so many people were there. And some of the leaders kind of had to leave for personal things, and it kind of devolved, and bad actors were there who, you know, people who were just looking for trouble and started causing a ruckus and destroying things. And that's when people kind of started losing interest. They were like, this is not much. This isn't what we came here for.
Yes.
It was eventually turned over as part of the National Park Service's Golden Gate National Recreation Area and is the museum we know it as today. You can take tours of the prison and island day and night, and millions of people arrive on island yearly to get a little taste of American history, as well as take a chance at experiencing the chilling hauntings that are said to take place on Alcatraz Island today.
I just know it's dark. I just know it's scary.
And it's no wonder the island and building are haunted after all of the suffering that must have taken place for over 100 years on that island. Nearly every visitor to the island, skeptic or believer, say the same thing. They often feel a strong sense of like heavy sadness or a feeling of unease with no known source. They step on the island and immediately are like, something's wrong. Their feelers go up, whether they're skeptics or not.
Well, duh. I know that sounds like
most people.
Maybe I'm a little too into this, but it's just kind of like, yeah, that's a fact.
Like if I didn't feel that, I'd be surprised.
Yes.
Yeah. It's as if a darkness truly does reside on the island, for sure. So we say. The hauntings began before the prison even opened, but really ramped up during that time. It's reported that many of the guards at Alcatraz, and sometimes even their families, would catch fleeting glimpses of ghostly figures that resembled soldiers all over the island. The sounds of cannons and gunshots would echo through the air as if the island was remembering the drills its former occupants conducted. And oftentimes, guards would rush to where they believed the sounds had originated, thinking an inmate had escaped or somehow obtained a weapon. But as they approached, the area would remain empty. They'd hear cannons or gunfire and run like, we've got an escape attempt.
Yeah, and
no one's
nothing.
there.
I would feel so stupid.
Guards would also report smelling smoke that seemed to be coming from the laundry room as though something was on fire. They would investigate the empty room and see black smoke billowing out, too thick to see through. Just minutes later, as more guards came to the laundry to help, the smoke would be completely cleared as if nothing had happened. A ghost that resides on Alcatraz Island was named the Lady in Green and had supposedly been reported often. It's been a while since we've had a lady in color. Yeah.
But never a lady in green. This is the first.
The woman would be seen in the washroom of the prison warden's home. She looked to be in her 40s with brown hair and a green dress. Along with the prisoners who harmed themselves and each other, there were also deaths reported on the island by families that lived there not only during the time in which Alcatraz prison was open, but also years prior, so when it was a military installation.
Yeah.
It's thought that the Lady in Green was the wife of one of the men who lived on the island who took her own life. She has been seen looking out the window of the washroom as if contemplating her present circumstances, whenever that present may be or have been. There were stories that Warden Johnston, the first prison's warden, had his fair share of ghostly encounters while he lived and worked there. He didn't believe in spirits even after spending time as warden in both Folsom Prison and San Quentin, but once heard the sounds of a woman crying while giving a tour of Alcatraz. He thought he must be mistaken because there were no women in the prison, but his guests seemed to hear it too. It seemed as if the sounds were coming from inside the walls as they walked down in the dungeon. They listened to the sobbing for a brief moment, and as soon as the crying could no longer be heard, a gust of icy wind swept through the group, chilling them to their bones.
Oh, I don't like that one.
That wasn't the last encounter Warden Johnston had with the paranormal during his tenure there. It is said that on Christmas Eve one year, Johnston was hosting a Christmas party in his residence. Several guests, mostly guards from the prison, saw before them an apparition of a man that seemed to be from the 1800s. He wore a gray suit, a brimmed cap, and had distinctive mutton chop sideburns. As the guests realized what they were looking at, the fire in the room went out as if a gust of wind had blown through. and the guests were subjected to a sudden and severe chill. A few moments later, the man in the gray suit disappeared as quickly as he had appeared in the first place. But they all were like, who is this guy with the mutton chops? And then the fire went out all cold, and then he just disappeared into the ether.
That's too movie magic-y feeling for me.
Spooky.
In the
Spooky
moment,
Christmas ghost.
I would have to be like, someone set this up.
Yeah.
There's too much. Like, it's
Well, it'd be easier to set something up like that today. Not so much in the 30s.
very true.
The guards of Alcatraz would hear the sounds of sobbing and moaning, though nobody was in the cells in which the noises came. They would smell horrible scents wafting through areas that were clean and would speak of something they dubbed the Thing that would appear with glowing eyes. They weren't the only ones to see the Thing either. As I mentioned earlier, Cell Block D was used for the most severe punishments for the most troublesome inmates. Today, it also seems to be the most haunted section of the prison and island as a whole. Guards and inmates alike are said to have noticed some strange occurrences in D Block. One such spirit being that of a prisoner of some kind that seemed to have been from the 1800s walking the hallways next to the strip cell. There was one story of a prisoner being locked in the hole when he began screaming. He was screaming so loud and hard that guards came running expecting to see an injury, but when they arrived at his cell, the inmate told of someone with glowing eyes that was in the dark cell with him. The story goes on that he cried out claiming he was being attacked by this thing with the glowing eyes so often that the guards began to ignore him. So they were like, okay, whatever. The screams would continue all day and well into the night when they suddenly stopped and the cell was consumed in total silence. The guards assumed he was finally asleep, so they didn't bother. But when they checked on him the next morning, they found him dead with a look of fear in his face and handprints around his throat. The man had been strangled to death in solitary confinement.
The Thing?
The Thing.
What do we think it is?
A demon.
I was
a
gonna
manifestation of all of the dark energy.
I was going to say that, but what? Are there people saying that today? Are we seeing the Thing on ghost tours or?
Some people will see like glimpses of like glowing lights and stuff, but
not.
No one's been strangled to death.
Well,
as
I would
tourist.
hope not. Oh my God. I was not expecting something like that.
Well, there was speculation that he was killed by a guard driven mad by his screaming, but no one ever admitted to it, and many now believe he was instead strangled by an evil spirit that tormented him in his solitude. And every so often when the guards would line the inmates up after meal times to head back to their cells, they would often count an extra prisoner at the end of the line who wasn't there when they did their recounts. This is all legend that I couldn't find definitive answers for, so take that as you will.
Why was he screaming in the first place?
There was something there with him.
Or
he felt there was.
It's just being in solitary for that long.
Possible.
I don't know.
Like if he was there for 19 days.
That's a lot.
Maybe. Today, people still seem to experience the worst of it while touring around D Block. People claim to feel a sudden chill, as well as an intense feeling of being watched. So maybe they don't always see the eyes, but they know someone's watching them or something. They also claim to occasionally get very emotional while walking by the cells, particularly cells 12D and 14D. 14D is supposed to be one of the most haunted, the air inside feeling as though it's like 20 degrees colder than the rest of the block. There have been several psychics who have visited Alcatraz who claim very strong feelings while they're in D Block, particularly near 14D. These psychics will feel emotionally charged impressions in the corners of the cells, as if the spirits of the former prisoners are still there crouched in suffering. Several authors writing books on the haunted side of Alcatraz claim to have felt strong vibrations and tingling as they entered 14D, as if an intense psychic energy was all around them. Ghost hunter Richard Sennett, along with a psychic, spent the night in Alcatraz, and he claimed as the doors closed on the cell he planned to spend the night in D Block, he could feel the sensation of icy fingers wrapping around his throat. Visitors will also claim to hear the sounds of chains, muffled knocks on the walls, and more otherworldly noises while spending their time in D Block. Blocks A through C have their fair share of paranormal activity for employees and visitors alike. People often hear whispered voices, screams, agonizing sobs, whistles, and the occasional clanging of the metal cell doors, though none are moving. One psychic named Sylvia Brown was brought in with CBS News to see what she could pick up while in the old prison. She claimed to come into contact with a malevolent entity who called himself the Butcher. It was believed that a man with the nickname Butcher was murdered by another inmate in the laundry room of Cell Block C, where Sylvia first encountered him. CBS brought Sylvia, the psychic, and a former inmate. He was very old at this point.
Oh, my gosh.
Lived there, and she said, "There's the Butcher. He's here." And he was like, actually, there was a prisoner that we called the Butcher. I don't remember what he said his real name was. And he was murdered here.
What?
So the article says.
Oh my God. Was that a known thing before she went there?
I think she's the first one to name the spirit as the Butcher.
That's some creepy stuff.
There are several rooms and corridors throughout the prison said to be haunted by devastating events that occurred there many years ago. There were many murders of inmates and guards in the 29 years it was in operation. And around Block C, particularly in the utility passageway where the attempted escape, which led to the death of 2 guards and 3 inmates occurred, there is a lot of activity. So during the Battle of Alcatraz, when the 2 guards and 3, There's a lot going on there.
Well, that
supposedly.
was a huge
event.
Yeah.
Park rangers and visitors alike will often hear heavy footsteps and crashing noises as well as screams while walking in this section of the prison. Some have claimed to hear the sounds of a riot, as if the events of the attempted prison break are still happening. There are a few particular former inmates that have been seen and heard from time to time by Park Service employees and guests on tours. The Birdman of Alcatraz has been seen a number of times around the former hospital where he spent a large amount of time while he was imprisoned here. So he had a lot of health issues. And people have seen a spirit that looks like him walking around the medical ward, the hospital. And it's believed that the spirit of Al Capone is still at Alcatraz as well. The prisoners were permitted to play instruments in their cells during music time, but it said that Al Capone would take his banjo to the shower as well. So he was like the only one permitted to play his instrument elsewhere. And one park ranger heard the sounds of banjo music coming from the showers, and it's believed that this is Scarface still strumming away his prison sentence.
Okay.
Do you imagine walking around and there's just like this ominous banjo music?
I was just about to say, a piano, sure. A violin, maybe.
There's like
A banjo? That's not ominous. I'd be scared, but also confused.
So I wanted to end this episode with a few stories, one of them with photo evidence. There are several people who have captured photos of supposed spirits while walking around Alcatraz. I saw one woman who took a selfie in the visitation room, and in the glass you can see what looks like a hand pulling down on her camera lanyard. But there is one photo that is so clearly the image of a woman dressed in 40s attire where there is very much shouldn't be. And there's no telling if it was doctored or not, but it's chilling. So let me show you that. Like, I don't know if that's real or not, but if it is, that's wild.
If that is real, that's chilling. But if it's not, okay.
So it's like the same thing where these people went and visited Alcatraz and were taking pictures. And when they got home and looked through their pictures, they noticed this woman who's dressed in 40s clothes when it is 2000s, 2010s.
And she wasn't there before.
She was not there. So there was a team of researchers who stayed on the island for 3 weeks as they were taking scans of the island to study the effects of climate change. And they stayed overnight mostly in cell block D. I think it's just maybe because it was convenient for them. I don't know the reasoning.
Or is it the most like intact? But also, if it is the most intact, that is
it's being held together by evil.
Interesting. Yeah.
The hospital gave one of the lead researchers the creeps, but there was one volunteer who had a strange experience. So one of the lead researchers is like, I don't go to the hospital. I stay over here because I don't know. I haven't seen anything or heard anything, but it just gives me weird vibes.
Yeah.
And one of them had like a horrifying night.
Oh, God.
One of the first nights they spent there. One of these guys was like an extremely loud snorer, and it was waking people up, and they were telling him like, you got to sleep somewhere else. We can't sleep with you here. So they asked him to go sleep in the mugshot room instead of cell block D. And he was like, okay, fine, whatever. The next morning, as the lead researcher went to go get him, he found him outside of the mugshot room sleeping in his gear, like with his gear. He was holding all of his things and sleeping outside the room that he left him in. And when the man woke up, he asked him, like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm never sleeping in that room again. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, you cannot get me to go back in there. Because he explained that in the middle of the night, he woke up to the sounds of a crowd of people in the room above the mugshot room. And he said that these ghosts were moving furniture, and a non-existent piano began to play. He grabbed his stuff, left the room, and never went back in there from that point on.
I would be back in the room with the other people.
Oh, yeah. He went back there. He's like, you're not leaving me alone here anymore.
No.
And they just put up with him for the following weeks because...
You're going to have to, or I'm gone.
I'm not sleeping elsewhere anymore.
Oh, my God. Why would they send him off? Like, okay, I can understand if you're...
It was so loud. It was like shaking the walls. Like they could not sleep. And they're like, okay, can you just go to a different section?
Maybe I
need one good night's sleep.
Maybe I just don't understand because I can sleep through anything.
That's
but
true.
like, I would never be like, it's too loud. Go away in this haunted place. Go by yourself.
Well, not all of them believed it was haunted.
That's crazy.
But he definitely did after this. There was one more story that I wanted to tell. And this person went on one of the night tours of the island to, one of the spookier tours. And they said, after the tour, when it was almost time to get back to the boat to leave, I decided to use the restroom, which is out of the way in a little separate building off of a curvy pathway. Surprisingly, this path was all in the dark, so I started to feel a little uneasy since I was by myself. As I was walking by some bushes along the path, I heard a very distinct and very sinister, macabre laugh. No, there wasn't an actual person hiding in the bushes, and there weren't any other tourists in the restroom or on the path. I definitely felt that this was an entity, and it wanted to scare me. Needless to say, I ran the rest of the way to the bathroom, got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. I actually waited a while to think about the experience before I digested it and told my husband about it. Normally, he doesn't believe stuff like this, but he actually believed me. The whole thing only lasted about 3 seconds, and I've never forgotten it. You think 3 seconds is short? That's a long time to be hearing a disembodied laugh.
That is a lifetime. I take back what I said about the fairy thing. How at the beginning you said you'd be afraid.
The fairy at night,
I'm never taking a boat at night. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
At night?
That's scary. The thought of falling down into the water at night.
And it's
pitch black.
completely dark.
That's one of the things that like really scared me about the Titanic.
The Titanic.
Yeah. Was just the pitch black, the darkness.
Yeah.
Only the stars and moon. At least today, it wouldn't be that dark because San Francisco is probably pretty lit up at night.
Yeah, but just
Even still.
I would be more interested in a nighttime tour, but I'd have to have like
be sedated to get across.
One of those. Have you seen those like mega flashlights that lights up like an entire football field?
Yes.
I'd have one of those.
Okay.
And good luck to everybody else because I'm shining it.
Would you go?
I think so.
You would?
I don't know. I wish there was a way, like a cloak I could put around my body to go to all of these haunted things where I won't be affected. Like I won't take anything with me. I won't have any nightmares. Like just a shield.
I feel like you could probably spiritually protect yourself with a spiritual shield.
I want a physical cloak. I need something to hold on to feel safe.
Well, I would go. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but a lot of the building was built using the old materials stuff, like some of the iron bars were from the military installation and things like that. So it just kind of, even the building materials carries, the past with it.
I'd go during the day. I think I would.
Would you?
Yeah.
I'd probably go at night, I think. I'd be scared, but I'd go at night.
But how would you get back? You'd go on the ferry at night?
I mean, I'd have to. I wouldn't like it, but I'd have to.
No.
I don't like a ferry. I don't like a ferry at night.
No.
But I'd do it for the haunt.
For the vine. No, I would never. Very interesting. This was a cool episode. Very history heavy, but I like when we do these.
Yes.
I have fun.
There was more to this than I assumed.
Yeah. But I feel like it goes without saying. I feel like we didn't even have to say it is haunted because after reading just the history, it's like, well, yes.
Yeah, so you don't even need to hear anymore. Yeah.
There you go. There's the evidence. It is haunted. So.
I agree. But thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. We really appreciate it. If you like this video, go ahead and like it and share it with your friends if you feel compelled to do so. If you're on audio, give us 5 stars. That would help a lot. We will have another episode later this week, a listener stories episode. If you have a story you'd like to hear from us, you can send it to our email at ghostiespod@gmail.com. We are finally getting to the end of the September emails. So in September, if you were here with us in September of 2024, we had an influx of subscribers.
Yeah.
And therefore an influx of stories submitted.
Yes.
I mean, hundreds of stories submitted in like a week or two's time.
Yeah.
And we're trying, I try to put like 10 to 12 stories per episode.
But it's a lot.
But we're working through it. So we will get to you. I promise we will get to you. But if you sent your email to us from October on, we're not there yet.
Yeah, we're working on it though. We are because, I mean, hey, I don't have any plans to stop in this anytime soon.
Oh, no, not at all.
So just keep listening, I guess.
And keep sending your stories because we will get to you.
Today is giveaway day.
Oh yeah, you follow us on Instagram. We're going to announce the winners, if they want us to, of the giveaway are for these beautiful blankets. Well, not these, but these are ours.
Yes, and if you will only get a DM from Ghosties. I know anytime, even if it's a very small account, they do giveaways. It's like, hey, this is me from my secret account. It's just going to be from the official Ghosties account. That's it.
Yes.
Just a heads up. Nothing's happened yet, but I just feel like gotta put that disclaimer out there.
Just in case.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed. We will see you on Thursday.
Goodbye.